Imagine you have a friend who lives in the biggest mansion in town. He drives a different gold-plated supercar every day of the week. He wears suits that cost more than your house. When you ask him what he does for a living, he smiles and says, "I'm the most innovative person on the planet. I sell the future." You look at his backyard and see giant warehouses, hundreds of trucks, and thousands of employees. Everyone says he's a genius. Every magazine puts him on the cover. He tells everyone that he's found a way to turn lead into gold. And because he looks so successful, everyone believes him. The banks give him billions. The smartest professors study his moves. But one day, you decide to peek inside one of those giant warehouses. You turn the handle, the door swings open, and you realize the building is completely empty. There are no products. There is no gold. There isn't even a floor. It's just a giant, hollow shell held together by expensive wallpaper and a very loud fan. This is the story of Enron. It is the greatest magic trick in the history of business. It's a story about how three men convinced the world that a failing pipeline company was actually a futuristic money machine, right up until the moment it vanished into a cloud of smoke, taking $60 billion and thousands of lives with it. To understand how Enron pulled off this heist, we have to look at their magic pen. In the early 1990s, Enron was a boring company that moved gas through pipes. It was reliable, but it was slow. And the people running Enron didn't want slow. They wanted to be rock stars. So they hired a young, brilliant man who had a very strange idea about how to count money. He told them, "The problem with the old way of doing business is that you have to wait for things to actually happen before you can say you made a profit. If you sell a burger today, you count the dollar today." "That's boring. I have a better way." He introduced them to something we'll call birthday math. Imagine it's Monday, and your birthday is on Friday. You know your grandma is going to give you $20. Under the old rules of business, you don't have $20 until Friday. But under birthday math, you decide that since you are definitely getting that money, you can write down that you have $20 in your pocket right now on Monday. You can even go out and tell your friends you're rich. You can use that imaginary $20 to convince a kid to lend you $10 real. This is the first twist. Enron became the first major company to use this birthday math for everything they did. They would sign a contract to provide electricity to a building for 20 years. They would sit down, guess how much money they might make over those 20 years, and then they would write that entire amount down as profit on day one. They weren't counting the money they had. They were counting the money they hoped they would have in the year 2020. This made them look like the most profitable company in the world, even though their bank accounts were actually empty. Because their birthday math made them look like geniuses, the stock market went crazy for them. Every time Enron signed a new deal, their stock price shot up. They started to believe their own hype. They moved out of the gas business and started trying to trade everything. They traded electricity. They traded water. They even tried to trade the weather. They built a giant trading floor that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, with hundreds of flickering screens and shouting traders. When important visitors came to see the office, the executives would actually hire people to sit at the desks and pretend to be busy trading, just to make the show look more real. But here is the second twist. While the show was beautiful, the reality was a nightmare. Because they were booking all their profits on day one, they had no money coming in on day 2, or day 10, or year 5. The company was actually bleeding cash. They were spending billions on private jets and massive office towers, but they had no real income. They were like a person who keeps buying new clothes with a credit card to look rich, while the debt collectors are banging on the door. To keep the game going, they had to find a way to hide the debt. If the world saw how much they actually owed, the stock would crash, and the magic trick would be over. So, they turned to their math mastermind. He came up with an even crazier idea. He created what we can call ghost boxes. Imagine you have a messy room. Your parents are coming to check if it's clean. If they see the mess, you're grounded. So, you take all your trash, put it into a cardboard box, and you give that box to a friend to hold in his garage. When your parents walk into your room, it looks spotless. You can honestly say, there is no mess in this room. This is exactly what Enron did. They created thousands of tiny shell companies, our ghost boxes. They would take all their debt and all their failing projects, and they would sell them to these ghost boxes. On Enron's main books, the debt vanished. It looked like they were debt-free and incredibly successful. But the twist within the twist was that the math mastermind was the one running these ghost boxes, and he was secretly taking millions of dollars for himself every time he helped Enron hide their trash. While the executives were hiding the mess, the culture inside the company became toxic. They had a rule called rank and yank. Every year, they would rank every employee from best to worst. The bottom 10% were fired immediately. This turned the office into a battlefield. People weren't trying to help the company. They were trying to sabotage their coworkers. It was a world where the smartest guys in the room were rewarded for being the most ruthless. They would even call up power plants in California and tell them to shut down, intentionally causing blackouts for millions of people, just so the price of electricity would go up and Enron could make a few extra points on a trade. They were literally stealing from grandmothers to make their imaginary numbers look better. This brings us to the third twist. As the year 2000 arrived, Enron decided they needed a new, big idea to keep the stock price moving. They decided to partner with a giant movie rental company to deliver movies over the internet. Remember, this was years before Netflix or YouTube. It was a massive technical challenge that they couldn't actually solve. The technology didn't work. The movies wouldn't play. After a few months, the deal fell apart. But because of their birthday math, Enron had already written down over $100 million in profit for a project that didn't exist. They were selling smoke and calling it fire. By 2001, the smoke was starting to clear. A few smart people began to ask why. They noticed that while Enron claimed to be making billions, they never seemed to have any actual cash. It was like a person who claims to have $1 billion in a video game, but can't afford to buy a real-life slice of pizza. The stock price started to wobble. Investors started to get nervous. Then came the fourth twist. In the middle of the chaos, the CEO, the man who invented birthday math, suddenly quit. He claimed he wanted to spend more time with his family. But the truth was, he saw the iceberg coming. He had already sold millions of dollars of his own stock while telling his employees to keep buying more. While he was escaping on a lifeboat, he was telling the workers that the ship was unsinkable. When the new leadership took over, they opened the ghost boxes and finally saw the trash. They realized that Enron didn't just owe a little money. They owed billions. The company wasn't a futuristic powerhouse. It was a giant mountain of debt disguised as a skyscraper. When the news broke, the stock price didn't just fall, it evaporated. It went from $90 to less than $1 in a matter of weeks. It was the largest bankruptcy in history at the time. But there is a fifth twist that most people forget. Enron didn't act alone. To pull off a scam this big, you need people to look the other way. Enron was being watched by the biggest accounting firm in the world, a company that was supposed to be the referees of business. Their job was to make sure the math was honest, but instead of blowing the whistle, the referees were actually helping Enron hide the boxes. When the investigation started, the accounting firm began frantically shredding thousands of documents. They weren't just watching the crime, they were part of it. As a result, the entire accounting firm, one of the oldest and most powerful on Earth, vanished right along with Enron. The final twist is the legacy that Enron left behind. You would think that after a disaster like this, the world would change. We passed new laws, we put the executives in jail, and we promised it would never happen again. But the merchant of smoke didn't really go away. He just changed his suit. The desire to look successful without actually doing the work, The temptation to use birthday math to trick investors and the culture of greed are still alive and well in the shadows of Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Enron proved that if you make the show spectacular enough, people will forget to check if there's anything behind the curtain. They proved that you can build a $60 billion empire